Today is April 4th, 2024. Welcome to Native Calgarian. Oki, Naganago, Mekoche Chistakomaki, or Dekots Nakotine Siku. My name is Red Thunder Woman. My married English name is Michelle Robinson, and I use she, her, they, and them pronouns. My Dene lineage roots me in the land of the Great Bear Lake tribe in Treaty 11. My people wore rabbit skin, so it's been referred to as the land of the Hare people. I'm a native to Turtle Island, and my Dene Nation is an uninvited guest to this area of Clinchotine, Indahe, and Satu Dene, meaning many big dog town, named after the Calgary Stampede. I was born in Calgary, or in Blackfoot. Mokinstis is Michelle Elliott, an English name that has afforded me privilege in an English colonial world with white proximity. My mother is Northern Slavey Dene or Satu Dene, but my Indian Act imposed status card by the Canadian government says Yellowknives Dene. Through my father, I am a daughter of the Mayflower and a daughter of the American Revolution while having a Canadian Indian Act imposed status card, which is a colonial construct by Canadian policies meant to divide Indigenous peoples' inherent rights. Indigenous Two-Spirit, or the Indigenous 2S LGBTQ community, and Indigenous women are at the bottom of this Canadian socioeconomic ladder because of colonial trauma, imposed poverty, racism, gendered violence, and land theft. According to the 2023 Quality of Life report from the Calgary Foundation, 31% of racialized Calgarians can't even find suitable employment. I'm not a social worker, I'm not an elder, nor do I speak on behalf of all Indigenous. I just share my journey as a Dene mom navigating this colonial, misogynistic, racist world in 2024. As a trauma-informed Dene woman who has attempted to run, join harmful colonial parties, spent money to be at expensive conventions, left my home to travel to those conventions just to vote on incomplete policies that still allow incarceration, a denial of justice, a denial of health services, racism, colonial trauma, and genocide of Indigenous and Black peoples. I have worked to continue, reports to advocate for, and attempt to work within these systems that meant to harm me and my community. I think of all of this today and hope we honor the many Indigenous lives lost for the so-called country named Canada. I hope you see your role in the importance of stopping harm, and as a citizen, see your role in reconciliation and as a treaty partner. Pride Month should never just be 1 month. It's important to understand the straight agenda and gendered violence was and is forced on these lands by Christian outsiders. Land acknowledgements are critical for creating a safer space for Indigenous, as well as honoring the host and acknowledging your role as a treaty partner in a so-called time of reconciliation. Can they be performative? Of course, we know as soon as you start talking. It's important land acknowledgements have meaning. I encourage everyone to introduce themselves with an acknowledgement of their ancestors, stories of displacement, and how you perceive your role as a treaty partner, a citizen of Canada, a refugee, or other land displacements, so we as Indigenous people know how safe you are to be around. If you won't pronounce your local Indigenous nations' names, won't say your pronouns, won't say your story of origin, won't acknowledge stolen lands, won't acknowledge imposed economic oppression, your role in reconciliation, I determine how safe you are to be around my community, my family, and myself. Understanding land acknowledgements and their importance is Indigenous 101 because it immediately addresses colonialism, oppression dynamics, broken treaties, and lies taught today in Canadian schools nationally. That's why settlers and those who call themselves Native Calgarians or whatever town you're from, you show me you have no Indigenous 101 understanding. Jesse Winty's book Unreconciled explains it perfectly, as do many other Indigenous authored books. Land Back is a movement that could save the planet from climate change created by colonialism, but it would be a part of a treaty partnership, part of meaningful reconciliation, and honoring global initiatives like the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. I'm speaking to you on the lands of the Niitsitapi, which is the Blackfoot Confederacy. The Blackfoot south of the imposed U.S.-Canadian border are the Blackfeet. North of the border are the Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani of the Confederacy. These lands are Treaty 7, signed September 22nd, 1877, with signatures that include the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Goodstoney, Chiniki, and Bearspaw nations of the Yeeharhi nations, or previously we called them Stony, and the Dene from Tsuut'ina. I acknowledge all First Nation, Métis, Inuit status, and non-status across Turtle Island as the keepers of these lands. All non-Indigenous are treaty partners with the government signing on your behalf. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you, previous donors, for showing your support. If you have value listening, watching, and can afford to give, thank you. For those who cannot afford to give, I'd love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, or you can send in your comments or your questions. Also, giving a review helps whatever medium you're listening from. I have a YouTube channel that you can go and subscribe. You can go to nativecalgarian.com for the latest podcast and pin posts on social media. So today I wanted to talk with a wonderful friend of mine, and I'll let her introduce herself in her way before we get started.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. Hi. My given name is Melanie Daniels, and I am a descendant of Harry Daniels. He was my uncle. My Cree name is Notukuyotin. That's how the ancestors know me. That means old lady wind in the Cree language. I'm joining you today from Treaty 6 territory within Alberta, also known as the Wetaskiwin County. I'm so grateful that you've given me an opportunity to sit with you today and have a conversation. I share everything that you said in your introduction, and that sentiment I agree with too. And I work very hard in my 27 years that I have been working in upholding Indigenous rights and protecting our environment, not only for our rights and our uses, but for all future generations, because it is so critical that we protect what we have left for our futures. I do believe too that Indigenous rights is the answer and our solutions to climate change, cumulative effects, the loss of biodiversity globally, the protection of ecosystems, all hinges on the protection of Indigenous rights. It's critical that we're having these conversations today. So I really appreciate that you've included me and that we can talk about some of the things I'm experiencing in my homelands here.
One of the reasons why I love having you on is because you just get it and I don't have to explain it. And I just hope that other natives can listen and go, oh, thank God. Let's just get to the meat of everything. And as another woman who's in Alberta, I know you experience what I experience and tenfold in a lot of other circles as well. So I so appreciate you being on the show today because I know how Alberta is. And when you reached out to me the other day and told me what you had seen, I'm like, you need to come on the show and you need to tell everybody what you just said to me and what you just sent me.
Absolutely. And like you, I too am a native Calgarian. I was born and raised in Calgary. So my lived experience is very urban. I actually, really came face to face with my indigeneity when I went to elementary school. But then through my career, because my father really sheltered me from my ancestry and my indigeneity, and I know he did it to protect me, but I have still found my way back, and I think really it was the ancestors guiding me here today. But so I want to share too that I also come from Calgary, and now living in rural Alberta, I'm experiencing a very different Albertan. And it's been challenging. I do have some neighbors that refer to me as an effing squaw.
Yeah.
And this is 2024.
Yeah.
There's times even in this county that I have felt unsafe. Yeah. But, we can talk about that and what I shared with you. I don't know how you do. Do you want me to just introduce the letter and
I think that's a great place to start. I think okay. That, I talk about how unsafe I feel every single day. And you can too. But I think this shows why and how you and I try to go to these political places to talk about our issues. And this is what happens.
Yeah. So I became aware of this group called the Voices of Pigeon Lake and Wetaskiwin County. My husband came across their Facebook page because he has some friends that have been signing up for this group. And actually, a couple of them are from Musqueam. And this group actually they posted a letter on their Facebook page to Minister Wilson, dated February 2nd, 2024. And Minister Wilson met with them on that day. And the letter expresses concerns over the way in which decolonization is becoming a conversation in Canada. They have concerns about how white citizens are being villainized and being portrayed as, you know, the bad guy in the history of this country. And also they express concerns about us, the attempts to indoctrinate their children to feel guilty over their ancestry, which I don't believe is what our desired outcome through any of reconciliation and land back. And they express some great concern about the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous People Act, which they called a federal policy. So they don't even acknowledge that it is legislation, and have somehow connected the UN DEC Act to the Alberta Land Stewardship Act, which was drafted in 2009 to identify thresholds in the province and protect regions of the province for, you know, future generations. But they've made this connection saying that Canada and Alberta are somehow working to support a land back movement, which is being designed to expropriate land from them. So I saw this letter, and then I saw the post following it. And there was a young woman from Musqueam who said that she felt bad going to this meeting because she saw that Minister Wilson brought our esteemed elder, Wilton Littlechild, to this meeting. And she noted in her Facebook comment that he seemed really uncomfortable. So of course he did. He was part of writing the United Nations Declaration. He had a huge role in that. It is something that is critically important to him. So I reached out to Minister Wilson as well as to Minister Nixon. And I expressed my concerns about this organization, this group being organized, and asked Minister Wilson what his response was to these people and how did he handle having our elder Wilton Littlechild there. Did he offer him protocol? Did he provide him any supports following this? Like I was, you know, in my mind, I was imagining a volatile situation that was probably uncomfortable for him. Mm-hmm. Anyways, so I did write this letter. I've yet to receive a response. The constituency did write back to me, but not the ministry. So the constituency office of Minister Wilson wrote to me and said that they by no means tolerate bigotry and ignorance in our county.
While we actually
tolerate
bigotry and intolerance in this country. Yep.
So anyways, I'm still waiting on a response, and that was written back in early March, I do believe. I did. So a couple weeks following that, I came across a poster in the local grocery store that this group was meeting on this day, actually, that I saw this. I forget the date of it. So I decided I'm going to go. I went and joined their meeting.
Brave.
I was actually quite shocked when I saw how many vehicles were outside the hall, because I kind of thought this would be a little group. And as I was walking in, there was a couple walking out, and I could tell that their energy wasn't positive. I felt like they weren't happy with whatever they heard in that room. But I walked into this room and there was at least 125 people in there. And I was a little bit like, everybody, of course, turned and saw me coming in, and they're like, wow, who brought the Indian? I could tell that's what they're.
Right.
Anyway, so I came in. And I was listening. The lady that started this group, she started a slide. Like when I first came in, though, this was an interesting little part that I came into. They were talking about the Wetaskiwin County councillors and the Reeves, and how these people are now in, like, you know, they're got to listen to the province of Alberta, and they're worried about their land, and so they want to get rid of these councillors and the Reeves in the county. I didn't hear the beginning, so I don't know what led up to that, you know, desire to get rid of them. So that conversation was ending, and then they got into a land back conversation. And this woman was a non-Indigenous.
Before we move forward with land back, that's the next topic.
Okay.
I will say this though. So there is a conservative effort to have political parties in all of the municipalities now, and even little towns. And so it was the UCP that drafted up this recall, your politicians, and they have been actively using that against anyone they deem progressive. Now, I bring this up because I'm an avid listener of Ryan Jesperson's TV or podcast named Real Talk, and he had on there the mayor of Wetaskiwin, who's like a volunteer firefighter and such. And I don't love listening to this podcast because you have white male conservative people pretending they're progressive or centrist, and they're not. And they regularly bring in Charles Adler, who he thinks he's progressive, and so people who think they're progressive are on this, listening in the chat, all of this. And so you listen to them and they're quite conservative people. And so Ryan brought in the mayor of Wetaskiwin and started to talk about, because I think he's also the president of the Canadian, the Alberta branch of Alberta municipalities. So he had a lot to say. He had a really cute little mustache thing going on. And so anyway, he was talking about a lot of different topics, including he's being recalled. They're using this legislation against him. So this group of people that you were with were likely with them. And and I'm just going to give one little other thing. I encourage people to watch that episode, because at the very end of it, he said, please remember that my town, and it might have been the Hinton mayor, actually. There was another episode with the Hinton mayor. One of the mayors, either Wetaskiwin or Hinton, as someone who grew up in rural Sylvan Lake before, when it was like 2,000 people, I've seen the acceptance of Albertans. And I heard him say, just remember, Facebook groups are not necessarily a reflection of our town. And I thought, oh, that just gave me that moment of like, oh, thank God he would say something like that. But at the same time, both the Wetaskiwin mayor and then the city one here, are both quite offended that there's a campaign actively against them, because I would argue both are definitely right of center, if not, and so yeah, they're somewhat progressive, and it's like, yeah, we can tolerate trans people, yeah, we can, it's like, come on, people, like, you're not progressive, but you think you are. So anyway, I want to encourage people to listen to those episodes, because I have to listen to white people in order to know what they're thinking. And so you went to this to listen to white people to see what they were thinking. And so I just want to encourage people to really listen to them, because these are wild conspiracies. And unless you're listening to a podcast where you can have full sentences and an actual conversation rather than the 2-sentence clip that you hear on the CBC or some other news, you don't get context. So I'll end it there, and I want to talk to you about what you were seeing when they started the conversation about land back.
Wow, it got it got quite interesting. So, and I do thank you for that point about the mayors, though, because I did see that recall action on Wetaskiwin mayor as well. Yeah. And I do have a little story to share about Hinton, if you're interested. But we'll talk about this group, the Voices group. So she put a slide up about the land back, the Yellowhead Institute red paper. That was the cover slide. Now, she started a conversation with this slide up, stating that she's done some homework to this lady, okay? So she has the perception that Justin Trudeau has bribed all the chiefs to buy land and do an addition to reserve, so she realized that when you do an addition to reserve, then that land becomes Canada Crown land, right? Federal Crown land, which is administered under the Indian Act. So now her whole talking point from that point forward was, so all these First Nations are trying to come for their lands. We want to take the lands back from them and then put them into this in reserve status so that Canada controls all the land. So my hand went up. I was like, I'm not going to allow this conversation to carry on. So we never got beyond that first slide. So whatever she had to present afterwards, I do not know. But my heart was in my throat. I do a lot of public speaking.
Yeah.
I was videoing. My camera was just shaking while I was videoing this. But I felt, you know what, I need to let these folks know. So she gave me the floor. And then everybody, of course, because I'm in the back of the room, they all turned to me. And like, because I know they'd seen me come in and they obviously suspected it was me that was wanting to talk. So I set the record straight about additions to reserve and how they work, and that Canada does not have authority on reserve lands. You need a band council resolution, you know. Plus, I've had a little side talk with a friend of mine, and she's like, why would we want this land back after they've raped it all? And I'm
Right.
like, that's a good point. So, you know, and also, but the added piece was that they're really convinced that, okay, we're coming for the land, but also their kids. And the irony on all of it is so, it was lost on them. I was very clear. First off, I said to them, you all need to understand that you are on stolen lands, but nobody's blaming you as individuals for that today.
Yeah.
We get it as Indigenous people that they were part of the manipulation. Their ancestors were manipulated and were offered something better than what they were leaving from their homelands, all of that.
Yeah.
So it really, I kind of just alleviated that conversation a little bit. They asked me if I would be willing to come and talk to them again at a future meeting, which I still have never heard back from anybody. So I'm not sure if they really want me to. I said I'm absolutely willing to have that conversation. It was so interesting though. So at the end, it kind of shut down after I spoke. Like she didn't go on any more slides. The presentation was turned off and people just started talking. And this one gentleman came to me and he says to me, oh, you know, I want to introduce myself. And he was Tom somebody or whatever. And he said, I want you to know that I'm a separatist. But he says, when we separate, please be assured that you people will have more rights than you do now.
Oh, thank God. Oh,
Right. Well, I said to him, you know, you're entitled to your position. However, you should be aware that almost every chief in this province opposed the Sovereignty Act. Then he said to me, what's that?
so they have no idea what they're talking about. You know, I'm so saddened by all of this misinformation and these groups that are coming out of them, because these are obviously like folks who don't know they're white supremacists, but are clearly, you know, like we can't have a KKK meeting. What is something of fear that we can really like get for these guys? And they come up with this garbage. So
Right?
it's so painful because like so the mayor Jody Gondak had a meeting with this guy who started this recall petition, and it's so sad and pathetic because he didn't really understand it either. He didn't understand what was going on. He assumed that the councillors would all vote on it and then it would be done. Like he did not get it at all. He has no he's just a layman who has no concept of politics whatsoever. And these folks,
Absolutely.
sounds like the exact same thing. Like these are folks who have no idea. They can't be bothered to read the TRC, the National Inquiry, the Indian Act, our books, or listen to our podcasts, but they can make up all sorts of like lies and disbelief in a different like right-wing world in the hopes that, you know, conservatives will take over municipalities. Like how gross is, like that's the conspiracy, that's the agenda. And how do they not see that they're being oh, and you know, I don't even like this guy, but he was on Ryan Jesperson. He called them useful idiots. What else
Wow.
are they?
That's, you know, and what I saw in this room was a bunch of scared people.
Mm-hmm.
They were scared and they're so ill informed. And I blame our education systems too. You know, like they have been failed. And I tried to present this like that too. Like, I'm not here to fight with you.
No.
I want to share what I know. I want to help us all understand each other and the situations that we're in. But they were, you know, like one lady where I worked in Musqueam for the past, you know, for 5 years. I've been gone from there for a year. But while I was working there, we did some work on assessing water quantity, because one of the First Nations was getting a new treatment plant, thanks to our prime minister. Anyways, so um, in that work, we had to understand what volume of water is available. So that we hired a very reputable company to do that assessment, and it was determined that there's 20 years of groundwater left. I'm on the same aquifer. All of these people in Wetaskiwin County are on that same aquifer. Most of us are, anyways. So I brought this up to them. I said, you guys, if you really want to be concerned about something that's critical, let's talk about water and what's happening with water in our province. Well, my gosh, like, they heard me for a second, and then next thing you know, we're talking about 5G cell towers. And I'm just like, because that's their fear, right? And I don't know how we fix this. I'm trying to be engaged. I don't want to feel fearful of my neighbors, but I'm at a point where I feel a little bit scared. Like, I have an oil company drilling in the back here, just behind my house on the neighbor's property, but I look out my back window and I can see the rig. Sure. I've been very vocal about my concerns about this activity, but I have two neighbors that are oil field workers, so they're not opposing it. Now I have another neighbors group up north of me. They're also having development happening around them, but there's a group of them that are opposing it. They're being heard. Well, I'm not. So one of my neighbors, because I'm a little bit out from them, right? But the one neighbor said to me, well, maybe you should go knock on doors and see if your other neighbors are willing to come and sit with you. And I'm like, knock on doors? I don't need to happen to what happened to Colton Boushie to happen to me, because I'll tell you, I am afraid of the people around here.
Yeah.
That's really crappy that I live somewhere where I'm trying to be a steward of some land myself, right? I'm not a big supporter of land ownership. I feel guilty about having a title to land, but I'm doing my best to honor our ancestors and care for.
Right there? I'm just kind of. Yes. I'm in the same boat. Like I have a house, have a mortgage, I'm on the title. And here's something really sad and pathetic. They're looking for senators to fill nationally, and there's two positions here in Alberta. Like, you and I qualify because we have title, and that is very rare for any Indigenous woman's name to be on title. But second, and what comes with it? Shame and guilt, because we're falling into the colonial system in order to survive. So I just wanted to kind of throw that at you and add that for context as people are listening, and let you continue.
Well, thanks for that. Maybe I'll apply for the senator's seat. Okay. And you know what? It goes even beyond that for me, because I've worked for industry. I've worked on the side of the table where I was trying to get, project certainty on behalf of my employer from my relations, basically. Like, maybe they're not my nations, but it's still, I feel connected to our people. And I feel like maybe this oil rig in my backyard is kind of karma for the work I was doing then.
Right.
But that's okay. I get it, though. I acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But I also know I did that work, and it helped me position myself better because I understand that conversation. But going back to these people, and I really, what I'm concerned about is, what is the leadership in this province doing to address these types of groups that are advocating for really hate? Like, it's just division and hatefulness. And Minister Wilson went there. He talked to them one time and then never returned. And I could tell when that room, they weren't impressed with the way that he handled the first meeting. And for him to not come back to another meeting is concerned. Like, I'm sorry, Minister.
Well, let me bring this up again. I'm certain the mayor of Wetaskiwin said that he had an ethics violation thrown at him for how he tried to engage with some of the chiefs about the homelessness issue. And then that Minister Wilson's office launched the complaint and said that you have to apologize to the chiefs. So he went to apologize to them, and they looked at him like, why do you have to apologize? Like, they didn't So, like, I don't know what kind of shenanigans is happening up in Wetaskiwin with Minister Wilson, but it's not sounding good from what I'm hearing from you and Ryan Jesperson, hearing from the mayor. So, like, it doesn't make sense of what they're doing other than they're on team conservative, they're on team blue, they're on team let's try to get hate and fear so that we can continue with this rise of fascism, this new police service, all sorts of crap.
Absolutely. And I've had encounters with Minister Wilson. So the first time I run into him in the local store. It was closing. He was picking up some things just from the little gas station store, right? He had an armful of things. And I was like, "Hi, Minister Wilson, it's Melanie Daniels." And he said, "I know who you are." He put all his things on the counter and he left the store.
Oh, what?
During the campaign, during the last provincial election, he posted a post on Facebook. He was in Muskwachees and he was talking about nothing about his platform, nothing, just about, oh, I'm in the Hawk radio and here's this nice picture of this young man he knew. And he said, it's pretty cool to see this guy. And I commented, it would be pretty cool, Minister Wilson, to hear what your platform is, what your plan is to protect Crown lands. How are you going to help us reconcile through different ways in the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation, which is just a colonial arm of, the government. And like I go on. And I don't know if you know this, but Minister Wilson cries in every public forum over MMIW to
I
the
know.
point where it feels a little, but so I told him at the end of my little rant on his post, I said, what is your platform, Rick? Indigenous people need to know what you stand for, not just tears and photo ops.
Right? And
I did.
that's fair
So
because go ahead.
they blocked me and deleted my comment. I took screenshots of it though, and I sent it to the NDP. So that's two negative experiences I've had with him. I've talked to him in conferences where, I've asked him questions that he has no answers to. His staffers come and find me afterwards, give me their business cards. Oh, we'll get you an answer in the next few days. Never hear from them again.
No.
So this government is demonstrating very clearly that they don't have much priority or value on the Indigenous people in this province. They're happy to see this hatred happening, I feel like. Yeah. And Minister Nixon is my MLA. I just live right out across the border from the riding. So I included Minister Nixon in my email, who has safety, community safety is part of his mandate. And I'm like, what are you doing to keep me and my husband safe in your riding? We're Indigenous stewards of land here. And I don't feel safe amongst my neighbors any longer. Yeah. And now I've been in that room of 125 people who recognize me.
Yeah.
Which makes me a little more leery sometimes too, right? Like, I don't know who they all were. I only spoke to a handful of them at the end of this gathering. Some of them were milling around, but they're going to see me around. I may not recognize them again because there was 125 of them. But you know what I mean? So I'm a little leery sometimes going out in the world in Wetaskiwin County.
I actually think that they're so racist, they can't tell the difference between you, me, or another Native woman. And I've encountered that here in Calgary, where you have two Native women working for an organization, I won't name it. They are night and day different in size, hairstyle, skin color. One's Cree, one's Blackfoot, and people can't tell them apart. They're just like, oh, there's one of our Native hires, right? Like their colleagues can't name them their names. So it's really funny because to me, it's like you're so racist. They probably don't know you are actually the legendary niece of Harry Daniels, how that has changed Canadian politics. Arguably, we haven't even dissected it enough to really show how, frankly. And they don't even know who you really are, right? Like, and that makes me so sad because that's how bad for racism it actually is. They won't remember your name. They won't remember. They can't tell the difference between you and any other Native somewhere close in the vicinity. And that is the sad, awful truth. But I
You're
will say
right.
this, I wanted to go back to, I've seen Minister Wilson cry for MMIW, but I will say this, and I struggle with this a lot. Um, I just left one of the so-called progressives groups that talk about 2S LGBTQ community members and their safety. And of course, there's a huge like movement right now to go against trans rights, trans health care, and queer people in general. And what's the racism is so bad in this country that if queer people actually read the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two Spirit Inquiry Report, they would see that all of it helps the queer community, all of it helps all racialized people, and of course, all of it helps white Canadians. But the racism and the anti Indigenous bias, it's like, oh, that's for them.
Yeah.
That's their government. They've never read it. They don't, they, if you were to take, like in my book club, we read both the National Action Plan, which is for the queer community, but it's like a whitewashed version of the inquiry, only worse. And then the National Inquiry, we read the whole National Inquiry. If you were to read the two, like our document is beautiful and it lays out everything so beautifully. And it talks about all of Canada and how to do this, the different regions, the different Métis to Inuit to First Nations, like all urban to non-urban. Like it's an incredible report. Most Canadians will never read it, and they'll never know that like the very policies, the anti-trans policies, are basically these are the solutions in the national inquiry, is to have rampant and national and inclusive and intersectional and Indigenous friendly trans healthcare, and for everyone, not just Indigenous people, but anti-racism bias stops all these white queers from really seeing that. And that is the sad and pathetic part. So when I hear you talk about Minister Wilson crying for MMIW, him not putting together that inquiry and all of his anti-trans policies and anti-health policies and even their recovery model, all of that goes against everything that's in that inquiry, everything. And because Canadians won't read it, they won't advocate with us, with you and I. So that I know it's so hypocritical to listen to when Minister Wilson cry over MMIW when every single policy, including Bill 1 of the infrastructures, are literally, we hate natives and this is how we're going to hate you more and kill you. Here's our genocide plans.
Right? Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's alarming.
Yeah.
It's really I agree 100% with everything you said. And I know that when in my heart, I know that if people would acknowledge that our rights are part of their rights too, protecting our rights from all of it, like our rights, our constitutional rights, our rights for our LGBTQ folks, all of it will benefit everybody in the long run. But it really is, you're right, it's hanging on to this division. People like it when it's us and them, or somehow they fear us and don't, and I don't get it fully. I try to, and I really try to create those, find those opportunities where I can have a conversation with my settler stock neighbors, right? And I get sometimes really angry. I have a neighbor who is a white male who's also gay, but a business owner in Edmonton, but also a property owner out here. So he has both worlds, right? He gets to go to the city and live a really good life out in the city and doing, nice things, eating nice meals and going to the symphony and things like that. And then he comes here and he's pretty well protected. Like he just stays on his property. But like he too sometimes really doesn't see all of it, right? Like I have to remind him sometimes of his white privilege.
Yeah.
Even, you know what I mean? And
there's
they
articles.
have it.
There's actually articles about white males and the problems with them that are gay because they only recognize a little bit like their oppression. So like that's why we have like trans and dykes marches, because they don't even recognize, females, and they certainly are like they can be very, very racist. And I would argue, like, we're all taught to be racist.
Yeah.
That, yeah,
I was raised to be racist by my own Indigenous grandmother
yeah,
because she was convinced that being Indigenous is wrong and bad and dirty. And it's terrible. I feel so horrified for her and my father that that is the result of colonization and colonial policy on them and their own identity. And I appreciate now. I used to be angry at my dad for not, you know, giving me that life, but I get it. I really get why he didn't want me to have that indigeneity. And but look at us.
right?
And then, I'm very keenly aware of my privilege. My mom's German. I really basically grew up like a German person for the first 25 years of my life. Of course, I had people who'd be like, oh, call me names and things like that when I was in school. But it was when I first started my career at Indian Affairs in 1997 and I started going out on the reserves. I'd really never been to a reserve before that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And it was First Nations who would always say to me, where are you from? And I'd be like, Calgary. And they're like, no, 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 where are you from? So I didn't know. I don't know where. So I had to start, I knew where my grandma was from, but that wasn't a reserve connection. It was Regina Beach, Saskatchewan, right? And
yeah.
all it like, so it's been a journey for me, right? It really has been a journey. And I always laugh kind of, I spent the first half of my life German and then the next half of my life I'm Cree. And I've been Métis, right? I was half breed. I was always told I was a half breed when I was a
Yeah,
kid.
yeah,
Then, as my uncle got more things done and really the terminology changed over to the Métis. And, we can trace our ancestry back to the Métis Nation and into Red River. But also on my great grandmother's side, she was First Nation and she's from Little Black Bear First Nation. And so I actually got my status a couple years ago now. And my
congratulations.
dad was very displeased, actually, very displeased.
Why?
And well, we're Métis, number one, and he can't understand how I could be an Indian. But I told him, first off, Dad, you didn't raise me to be Métis or even understand what that is. I had to learn those things on my own and through my career.
Yeah,
Even my Uncle Harry, because he was off busy doing things around the world and changing the world, right? So he was a busy man. And I only got to see him maybe once every couple of years. And it was always Christmas or something. We weren't talking about the Constitution.
politics. Yeah,
So I told my dad, though, I said, Dad, I am doing this for your grandmother.
yeah,
Somebody decided one day that she wasn't who she was for her and said that she couldn't be an Indian anymore.
yeah.
So to honor her, I am getting my status. And even my daughter has her status. So yeah, I feel I'm hopeful that that brings us all together as Indigenous people eventually too, because we both know there's a division amongst us as well. And there's racism amongst us as well.
Oh God,
You
yeah.
know, so this is a human condition issue.
Yeah. Well, I would argue colonialism taught us to hate each other. I would say that. Because like I
Absolutely.
tried to tell people, like you're in Wetaskiwin, right? So when I talk about land acknowledgement and I teach about treaties, I talk about Wetaskiwin and I show this little video of Darcy Lindbergh talking about the um the Cree and the Blackfoot meeting in the hills where peace was made and
Yes.
how that is a legal contract by Cree and Blackfoot, but to try to show Canadians like the propaganda of like you guys were always fighting with each other. It's like, yeah, okay, Mister, I can't stand Edmonton spit because you're in Calgary spit. Like come on, like grow up. So
That's right.
yeah, so that bigger picture, like today out of all days, actually, is the North Atlantic Treaty, which was made, I want to say 75 years ago, which was NATO. And so I'm like, oh, so you can respect a treaty, just not the one with natives.
Right. I was thinking about this just yesterday too.
Yeah,
How why there's international treaties that we would never consider breaking,
yeah,
but these ones, well, whatever. Easy come, easy go. I don't know, like what, right? Like I don't know. It's really a struggle. It's a hard time. I feel, well, not that it's ever been an easy time for us, but
Yeah.
I also, how do you feel about this? As we move through reconciliation and we hear all these stories, I still continue to learn, right? Like I had awareness of residential schools, I had awareness of the 60 scoop things, but until I started like watching like shows, Little Bird, and reading more and things, I feel like I am being traumatized on the daily almost going through it all. And I feel, but I do feel a level of obligation to know and to participate and learn and feel it, because then I'm honoring those ancestors,
You know
right?
how I
And
put this together though for that, like kind of back to this, because I was raised just like you, deny who you are, do not talk about it, do not acknowledge it. So I was like raised white. So in my 20s I really unpacked like domestic violence, feminism, misogyny, 30s racism, now in my 40s colonialism, and that bigger picture of by doing it now, we are helping our children. Because I talk about how both my mom and dad were completely ill equipped to talk about colonial trauma, colonial determinants of health, social determinants of health. Like they were so unequipped for all of that. And I can't even really be angry at them or blame them, because I had a conversation with the late Patrick Deranger, and he said to me, "You don't understand. We knew something was wrong during the American Indian movement, but we didn't have the English words to put together what was happening. Couldn't explain it." He said, "You young people and all of your new fancy words and the way you put it together." And I'm like, fuck, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. That that we weren't talking what was colonialism, like what are policies by the Indian Act. And you and I were talking before we aired, you and I are from the generation where the internet was new, where we like I just got a smartphone in the 2000s where,
right,
you know, that bigger picture, like we didn't have access to, reading documents, to even the libraries. Like in Sylvan Lake, they were open from like 9 to 5 on like Tuesday to Sunday, or not even
right,
Sunday, Saturday, right? So you had to
yeah,
like plan your time to go to the library based off of business hours, school hours, and try to hit it at the right time. Like not the same. Like this world, you can Google anything right now and read them. So I will say a lot of the books we read, I cry. I can't get through them. They're really traumatizing to me. And I think of Clearing the Plains as the probably the first book that I read that I was like, I don't know if I'll ever finish this book. And I open it and I'll read a couple of pages and I'll sit with it for a couple of months sometimes, depending on what I read. Like it is horrible what was done to us. But it does give me that strength to like know, do better, articulate it, and teach my daughter so that when they go through this world, it's less horrendous, right? And I know that the education is failing everyone. There's no one it's helping at this moment, and their new education package they put out is not that.
oh
It's not
god.
it. They missed the assignment. So it's that bigger
Oh,
picture that we have to educate, and hopefully people keep paying folks like you and I to come
you
in and
know,
speak, but it's hard.
and thinking about education, something I saw too in what this group, this voices group, they're very concerned about their kids hearing the truth of the past and how Canada was formed. And I want to try to find ways to reassure them that we don't want their children to feel guilt and remorse for something they had nothing to do with. What we're asking is that they understand that they benefit from a system that was put in place to, first off, manipulate their ancestors too into building this country,
Yep.
but stealing from ours and, genociding ours, if
Yeah.
that's a term, but right. But if we don't know these things, how do we make the future better for all of us?
Yeah,
We
exactly.
just continue to do the same things over and over again. But these folks, I don't know how we reach them when there's so much fear. And I really feel like it's a lot of guilt. And people internalize guilt and they don't really recognize it as guilt because guilt feels gross. I don't like it when I'm guilty. I felt guilt, and my mom's Catholic. Come on.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
I know guilt,
Yeah.
but I get it. We want to avoid feeling that way.
Yeah.
And nobody's asking them to be guilty over the past. We're just asking them to acknowledge the past.
Yeah.
Let's all move forward from it together in a way that's going to support a future that's prosperous and healthy and beneficial for everybody.
Well, and
But
that's why I talk about treaty partnerships. Like, we just have to start seeing each other as treaty partners. That's all. That's it. If we can start equally like benefiting, that's it. There, we've achieved the goal. Like, that's what
right,
it should be. But they make up all sorts of crap in their head, and they don't understand that the crown owns most of the land, not them. We don't want to take your farm.
no, yeah,
unless I'll caveat that, like the Red Deer Indian residential school, that area is a farmland.
I'm also for farmers. Like I've met some farmers, even when I was working in Muscatchees, they'd call us, "Hey, I want to sell my farm. Are you guys interested in buying?" Oh my God, yes. Like, I think that's a beautiful thing. But because there's some farmers who understand, they get it. And they also don't want to see their lands end up in the hands of big corporate farmers who just destroy the land.
Yeah.
But I just I tried to encourage our federal government at one point. Even I was at the convention, as you know, and I was trying to motivate some new thinking around land back. Why not give tax credits to landowners that sell to Indigenous people, or some form of tax incentive or something like that, or if they sell to us at a reduced rate, or you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And but those are conversations that folks nod and go, "Oh, that's a good, interesting idea," and then
You write
nobody
me that
wants to
policy, I'll
explore it.
submit it tomorrow. Like we're putting policy forward, and the Indigenous Peoples Commission, every province and territory was supposed to reach out to their Indigenous people in their area and say, "Hey, we're putting forward policy." So me and the policy chair, like I've submitted one in particular for, because I like women. There's a gender equity plus is federal, and I love it, except that the calls to justice are not being met. So I talked about how Indigenous two-spirit and women are at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. I'll forward it to you, actually.
Okay.
I don't know if it'll get approved, we'll see. So anyway, if you have a policy like that, send it to me. I'll send it to them, and we'll go from there. Because we can put forward policy. That's the whole thing. And it's just a matter of reaching out and finding the right people to talk to about that. And that's why I was doing calls the other day for phone banking.
You know what? I'll draft a policy for you to table. I
Yeah.
also think I try to encourage some thought around transfer payments to provinces and putting in terms and conditions around reconciliation into transfer payments
Oh, send me that one too.
to whole provinces to some commitments, right?
Yeah.
Because the UN DEC is a federal legislation, it's the law of the land. So there should be an ability for them to start conditioning transfer payments to some metric. How are you, province Alberta, meeting the reconciliation, truth and reconciliation calls to action, for example?
Yep.
Something, whatever, like,
Yeah.
so I will definitely send you those ideas because, and I don't think that running for federal politics is in my future, not in this province. Not where I live in my riding for
I
sure.
know. Put your submission in for senator. You need I want to say at least 3 recommendation letters. So I have to write one for 2 other friends. I'll write one for you too, because I figure if we can get 3 good Indigenous women putting their names in that deserve to be at the Senate, that will help a lot with these conversations. And especially, there's 2 openings from Alberta. So
it's interesting because you're not the first person to kind of encourage me to do this.
yeah. So get letters of recommendations from them. I think they need a security clearance and like show proof of the land title, something like that. I have to look into a little more, but I'm really busy with another thing coming up. Anyway,
I
Um,
have a deadline that I'm busy with too, but I'll look into it again. I did look once, and
yeah,
um, but yeah, no, I think it would be an interesting place to land and to end my career.
that'd be great. And Ottawa's such a cute little place. I don't
I
just
like Ottawa.
adorable. I don't know. I know it's on stolen land, so that sucks. And I know we have like a huge population of Inuit that are there that are homeless.
Oh,
I went for the Red Dress Day at our convention there. There was
I did too.
yeah, did you go to the Red Dress event that was
At the
actually
Parliament Hill.
I went to that one, but there was another one in the Inuit. There's an Inuit artist that passed. Her name is Annie. Last name I can't possibly pronounce. And she's like internationally known, but she died homeless in that park, so they named it after her. And the Inuit had a special Red Dress Day ceremony that day, so I went there, and then I went over to Parliament and seen Bridget Tolley, and I probably seen you there. Probably have
Yep,
pictures, and I forgot.
yep, that's okay.
Yeah, and then we went back to convention, and yeah,
Yeah.
that bigger picture that I wish that we had better policy, and that everyone's seen it that way, but most people don't want to, like, there's such a gap between us and even the rest of the folks that claim to care. Like, they just don't see us as treaty partners. They see us as the really small minority that we have to
Yes.
include now, as opposed to treaty partnership.
You know, I really feel like sometimes if they could wrap their head around the stolen land story, just that alone then would allow them to understand and reflect upon how we're feeling. We acknowledge, I'm sure, I can't speak for all Indigenous people like you say too, but I think we have some general awareness that we're not getting the land back. Nobody's packing their bags and going back to their homelands.
Well, no, and to be fair, like, you have family that's non-Indigenous. I have family
Absolutely.
that's non-Indigenous. I have friends who are non-Indigenous. Well, one of the reasons why I got so pissed off at Stephen Harper and was helping the Liberals was because of Bill 21. It was a concept of, it was an Omar Khadr bill is what it was, because they really hate brown people, but it would have applied to, say, my brother. So my stepmom is from Austria. She was born in Austria, and then she became a Canadian citizen. I literally told my family, look, you can't trust Harper, go get your Canadian citizenship, now. But regardless, even when they did become Canadians, my brother, who's like, non-Indigenous completely, would have fell under that bill 21, where it's like, if they decide they don't like him, they can just ship him to Austria, even though he's never been there, doesn't speak the language, like a stupid. So, like, I remember fighting for non-Indigenous. I wish they would fight for us.
Yeah. I believe, you know what I believe? I fight tooth and nail for land and water. That doesn't matter if you're Indigenous or not.
Yes,
Like,
yes,
and and so yes, I absolutely use the Indigenous rights to facilitate the conversation because I can, and
yeah,
because it's constitutional, and
yeah,
we have treaties that also say, these are important documents and important tools for us and to leverage to move our concerns forward. And I think wise non-Indigenous people would recognize that. And there are wise non-Indigenous people who totally are like, yes, I get it. When we protect Indigenous rights, we're protecting everybody's rights.
yes, yes. So, wow. I know you and I could keep talking. Is there anything else you want to talk about today on the podcast? And know you're welcome back to talk another day.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there'll be more issues you and I can talk about in the future. So none of this is going away tomorrow. And
No.
I do, what, I just love that we can spend this time together because I don't feel so alone. So
Yeah.
thank you, Michelle, because there are days when I do feel very alone out here. And yes, I have Musqueam and they're my neighbors and I have a lot of friends there, but they have a lot of their own issues that, they got to work through. And I can't be piling mine on them too. And so I appreciate your shoulder to lean on, and that you are the only person who really felt that concern for me, that I went to that place and I had those, I took the time to go and hear these folks out. And this is the second time I actually went to, there was a luncheon that a company put on, and I walked in the room and everybody was like, oh my, heads turning. And my daughter at that time was like, because a friend of mine said, oh, you're so brave. Because there was even a truck there with freedom spray paint. And this was just a barbecue for the neighbors. It was put on by an oil producer here. But of course, I went in my full Indigenous garb. Like I had my beads and everything.
Nicely
And
done.
yes, but I stood out and I was a little nervous there too. But it was just a luncheon, so I didn't even have to talk to anybody. I spoke to a few people who some didn't make it very warm. I didn't have a real warm welcome, but that's okay. I sat down with them anyways. But my daughter said to me, well, my girlfriend was telling me after told her I went to this luncheon. She said, "You're so brave, Melanie," and you said this too. And I mentioned that to my daughter, and my daughter started crying. And she's like, "Mom, you shouldn't have to be brave to go to a luncheon."
Yes.
And
Yes.
then I started crying. On that, I appreciate that you're brave and I'm brave and
Yeah.
us brave Nehiaos, we're the ones who will help make a different future for our kids and all kids.
Well, and we're on the shoulders of our ancestors who did the same work. And I think of that a lot,
Me
where
too.
when I feel like I'm in a really tough situation, I have no idea how you and I are not meant to be here after what our ancestors went through. So I don't know. It's and when you look at your kids, you're like, it's worth it. Like it's always worth it. So I don't know. I'm so grateful for you just being in my life in general, because it's that bigger picture that if you don't have sisters to like lean on and just be like breathing with, I can just breathe with you and I don't have to explain any of this. You just know and you get it and you experience it too. So I just hope you know it's reciprocal always. And I'm so grateful we cross paths, and I'm just looking forward to our future together too, as well as our kids' future.
Sakit and Nemus.
Mm,
Pinamascompton.
Masi.
Love you.
Oh, I love you too. And I have my exit. You're welcome to chime in as I go. And yeah, we'll go from there. Thank you for being
Okay.
on the show, Melanie.
Thank you for having me. I really had a great visit with you.
Yay! We'll do this more often.
I'm down.
Nice. Okay, so folks, if you are not reading Indigenous peoples, why aren't you? I have a book club every month, every second Monday of the month for that matter. So mine's coming up this Monday coming up. Um, and in your area, there should be some sort of reconciliation committee, which you should join. And if you're not, then make one. Do that work. I'm really proud that this podcast gives solutions, cultural safety training, cultural first aid, and all of them to create safer spaces for Indigenous people of color, those with disabilities, to us LGBTQ to speak. According to the 2023 Quality of Life report from the Calgary Foundation, 88% of racialized Calgarians feel uncomfortable or out of place because of their religion, ethnicity, skin color, language, culture, accent, gender, or sexual orientation, which is up from 75% in 2022. And I would imagine after the Palestine issue, the 2020-24 quality of life, that's going to go up from 75 to 88 to up more. And I think Melanie and I spoke very clearly of how hard it is to be Indigenous in this so-called country. Anyway, 84% of racialized Calgarians believe that racism exists. That should be 100%, folks. Anyway, thank you to Cheryl Ward, Chelsea Branch, and Alicia Fridkin of heretohelp.bc.ca. And they have a whole section on Indigenous peoples and what is Indigenous cultural safety and why I should care about it. So I hope this inspires you to look into it more, because whenever you see a Native person in the room, there's a high chance they don't feel safe, let alone if they're actually being accosted. Those cultural action tools are available. I'm just lucky enough to highlight and repeat them here. Please support work like that as part of your reconciliation and settler understandings. Internal racism, lateral violence is another form of violence that Indigenous and equity deserving people experienced by this structure of oppression on these lands. Racialequitytools.org has some wonderful resource files. What is Internalized Racism by Donna Bevins. We actually talked a little bit about that today with how our parents were compared to us when it came to, being ashamed of who we might be. And that's a hard part when you're raised in that environment. A lot of Indigenous people, Melanie and myself and others, have to like unlearn those things. Do's and don'ts for bystander intervention by American Friends Service Committee. So afsc.org. They have tons of information on how to help and de-escalate a situation when you're seeing something that is not kind. I wish anyone who follows me on my social media would watch the anti-racism organizational lead for the city of Calgary, giving a presentation on the journey of becoming an anti-racism leader. So if Melanie or I walk into a room and everybody's watched this YouTube video of becoming an anti-racism leader, imagine how much safer we would feel. Black Lives Matter activists Taylor McNally and Adora Nofer are being legally targeted by the legal system. Please go to Stop the Stack YYC to learn more on how you can support them after everything that they've gone through. Indigenous have been talking about the issues, sharing the trauma in reports, commissions, public hearings, just going to be regularly disregarded. No more. Honor our words, honor the treaties. Bloody hell, remember our names. Listen to the politicians and their policies and platforms. If they don't recognize the marginalized in their budget with Gender Equity Plus, if they're cutting violence prevention programs and services, Indigenous education, uterus health choices, gay straight alliances, lack of human rights for migrants, immigrants, folks with disabilities, know that your vote to that party negatively impacts equity deserving people. Demand that they implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission 94 calls to action, the recommendations of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the multiple reports about child welfare reform, violence prevention, and now 231 calls to justice from the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit. I'm just going to pause for a moment and talk about the Reconciliation Action Group. We just shared some information on how to protect yourself as an Indigenous person giving birth in these colonial hospitals, on how to protect you and your child. I know it's unfair, it's unjust. We have to have these conversations, but preserving families is trying to do that work here in Alberta. And obviously, I want Indigenous mothers to keep their babies. Provincially in Alberta, we also have the 113 Pathways to Justice, which would talk about all of these health issues that we talked about. Clearly, they made a piece of paper. They don't get it. They don't buy into it. Anyway, you can hold your MLAs to account to it. You can also talk about the White Goose Flying Report per municipally here in Calgary. There's a new report out of Lethbridge that just came out. Denying these reports is a form of abuse called gaslighting. Our people are experiencing extreme racism in every institution with multiple reports that say the same thing. Demand change from election platforms and politicians. If they don't understand oppression dynamics, they have zero business running. Should be understood by everyone. And frankly, if you're a voter and you're voting for people that don't understand these concepts, like even in theory, what are you doing? Google articles on how non-Indigenous Canadians can become allies. Also, the Calgary Foundation has a wonderful ally toolkit that you can download. It's free. I wanted to highlight the aboriginalalert.ca. This has a lot of those missing children, and the Missing Children Society of Canada is getting better at being Indigenous inclusive. Womenshomelessness.ca has a great statement for demand for urgent action to protect the lives of Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit, and gender diverse people experiencing homelessness. Our numbers for the drug poisoning are record high. Our Alberta government is doing the worst type of recovery model they could do. I just had this conference for folks who follow me on Twitter. I tweeted all about it. At the end of the day, if someone you know is using substances, do not use alone. If they are using alone, you can contact the National Overdose Response Service at 888-688-NORS for support. There are some apps you can download, the Brave, Doors, and Lifeguard apps that will help you. I strongly support Freedom's Path Recovery Society.ca. You can go donate there. They provide free one-on-one addictions counseling, group treatment for recovery in Calgary, are queer-friendly and anti-racist. As many of you have heard, I've been fully supporting Canada's first 2S LGBTQ addiction recovery center, stonewallrecovery.ca. You can also throw some funds there if you'd like. If you're experiencing emotional distress after anything we talked about today in each talk, you can call the First Nation and Inuit Hope for Wellness helpline at 1-855-242-3310. It is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They also have a website of hopeforwellness.ca that has a little text box. And if more related to missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit, you can call 844-413-6649. This will air before May 5th. We talked a little bit about May 5th, Melanie and I. Here in Calgary, we have Deb Green, who has started, and she's having the 4th annual one this year. And she is putting a call out. It's all on Facebook. You can donate red dresses if you want. You can volunteer if you'd like, and you can just come and attend our event. So for families, it is hashtag families first. It is for your healing. So we always encourage families to be there. So if you want to donate, great, but don't think we're putting your t-shirt or your banner up, because this is about centering the families. So if you want to support that, please do reach out to me or go on to Facebook, and I have been sharing that stuff on social media, and you can contact us from there. Indian Residential School Survivors and Family Hotline is 866-925-4419. The Native Youth Crisis Hotline is 877-209-1266. For non-Indigenous, there are usually distress center lines in your area, a functioning 211 provincially, and now the new national number of 988. And you can, if you dial 833-456-4566 or text 45645, it just goes back to that 988 number. You can also go to crisisservicescanada.ca for more information. Kids Help Phone 1-800-668-6868. And the Trevor Project has support for 2S LGBTQ youth, 866-844-7386. Trans Lifeline, 877-330-6366. And you can go to lifevoice.ca for even more crisis supports. Violence is my everyday reality. Every Indigenous generation has faced it. This is self-care, how I take my power back, how we have media representation, and maybe a small voice. That's why I started this podcast, to speak freely, without interruption, tone police, leadership shaming, gaslighting questions. Many people don't want to hear Indigenous opinion, but sure want to tell us about theirs. And by people who know nothing about Indigenous people, colonialism, the constant surveillance of the Indigenous people, our protests, our vigils, and our rights. I and many others share info on microaggressions daily. So it's just unacceptable to say it anymore. Learn about being trauma informed. Folks like me are dealing with internalized racism, gatekeeping, folks that survive off the status quo, folks who are so in their trauma, they stop people from doing the work and deplete personal resources. Internal and external racism is an everyday reality for me, Indigenous people, folks with disability, QT, BIPOC, and others. Masicho to my ancestors, to my granny and to my mom, of what strength looks like through their example, my aunts, my uncles. I want to thank my dad for teaching me to be strong and blunt, my stepmom for showing me what a proud culture is through her Austrian family and roots, and teaching me to be a proud Calgarian. It is through her I'm a second generation proud Calgarian. And to my husband, Darcy, he produces and edits this show, the Stonewall, or not the Stonewall, Voices in Recovery podcast. And he has been my husband, childhood friend, father of our child, and support down my journey of this red road, witnessing decades of racism and sexism. And to our child, we are blessed to learn from you daily, and we are honored you chose us. You give me daily accountability to be better, to be stronger. And I hope that my child and my family will be proud in the future of us trying to discuss these present day issues. I honor the Blackfoot, as the elders and members have been so kind to me on my Red Road journey. Elder Red Crane taught me how to pronounce my spirit name, and Leonard Kenny taught me how to say it in Satu Dene. My humblest apologies. To the Blackfoot and Dene elders and language keepers as I try to learn proper pronunciation. And I'm going to apologize to the Stony for not saying Earhi sooner than today. Anyway, my Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you, previous donors, for showing your support. If you value listening or watching and can afford to give, thank you. To those who cannot afford to give, I'd love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or questions. Also, having a YouTube channel helps if you're into YouTubing, and you can go to nativecalgarian.com for any of the latest podcasts and to reach out for me to talk to you or your people in any way. Last thing I want to do is a touch grass moment. And I just wanted to say that I've been feeling hope again with the NDP leadership. Grateful that that is happening. So you have until April 22nd to get yourself an NDP membership. It's $10. And that can, if you get it by April 22nd, then you can vote for the leader. And it's important that you get one because it's a ranked system. So if the first person doesn't astronomically win, then it goes to the second one and third. So every vote really does matter in this case. So if you're even kind of considering it, that said, unfortunately for Melanie and I, it doesn't necessarily work for us because the NDP membership is unfortunately connected federally and provincially. And unfortunately, we are connected federally to a different party. So we don't want to go against our constitution. So I need more of you to do it for me so that hopefully we can get, I think Nenshi can take down Danielle Smith, but I also think her own party is going to take her down first, but whoever her successor is, Nenshi will be able to take down. So I'm hoping you will all take out your memberships. So that's my go touch grass moment. And, you know, I hope that all of you consider doing that as well, and we'll go from there. So thank you folks for listening. I always want to end by giving side eye to those Calgary rabbits. You're lucky I'm not tradish. And my beautiful cousin would respond, "Are you being my dish?" Thanks, folks.